The Frontline podcast is brought to you by Legion Technologies. Hourly employees want and need flexibility and predictability. They desire more connection and belonging with their peers and companies. And businesses want to maximize productivity while enhancing employee engagement to reduce turnover. Who said we can't have it all? The Frontline podcast is focused on discussing the challenges that come along with having an hourly workforce and shedding light on these important employees who are so often overlooked. You'll hear from leaders bringing transformational and innovative change to their organizations and ways you can improve your own experience and the experiences of your employees, no matter where you sit in your organization. At Legion, we believe that AI-powered workforce management solves these challenges. I'm your host, Tracy Chernoff, Director of Employee Engagement at Legion Technologies, and the host of the podcast, Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources. Be sure to subscribe to the Frontline podcast so you're the first to hear our bi-weekly episodes, which will come out every other Thursday. Learn more at legion.co, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, and get ready to be part of the solution. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Frontline podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another episode. Just some housekeeping before we get into the episode. This week's episode is just with me, so it is a solo episode. We might sprinkle a few of those in every now and then, just to keep some things fresh, right? And as we search for the best of the best guests. The other thing is that we are going to move to a monthly episode release. So rather than a bi-weekly, we will move to monthly. So you can catch the next episode next month. And actually, we have a really interesting guest for next month. So I think you are really going to enjoy it. In the meantime, this week's episode is all about focusing on that state of the hourly workforce report that came up in the last episode with Sanish Mandkar, the CEO for Legion Technologies. And we talked a little bit about the survey when we met and we recorded the episode, but I think that there are probably some things that we can do a deeper dive into. So that's what we are going to cover in this episode today. So one of the first things that I want to remind you of is that everything that I will reference about the survey, you will have an opportunity to download the survey as well if you go to the show notes and you click the link that is there for accessing the survey. So, and the report, I should say. And again, this is the 2022 State of the Hourly Workforce survey, which was commissioned by Legion Technologies. So basically what happened is over 1,000 employees and managers were surveyed and asked a ton of questions about just kind of like where they stand today and the state of the hourly workforce. And actually, it was over 1,500, if I'm being exact. I think it was like 1,000 employees and then over 500 managers. So we have over 1,500 responses here in this data, which makes it pretty significant. One of the first things that I want to share as far as a statistic goes is related to how managers are able to attract top talent. One of the greatest challenges for any frontline manager or employee or business, thinking really specifically about retail and hospitality, especially the food industry, is that finding talent is really, really challenging. And finding talent in any industry is challenging right now and probably in general, but especially for these companies that are servicing customers that are really what we call the front line. And this specific metric that I'm going to read you kind of calls on this. So 63% of managers find control and input into work schedules as the greatest incentive for prospective employees as they interview, followed by greater transparency into shift assignments and scheduled hours, which came in at around 52%. So 63% of the managers that were surveyed said that control and input into schedules was the greatest incentive for the employee that they were, or the candidate that they were interviewing. And when we think about that, the majority of managers saying that this was a huge incentive for people, knowing that they would have access through Legion to be able to see their schedules more transparently, to have control over their schedules, to have input into the days and the hours that they work, that was a huge incentive. I bring up this metric because when we think about the other metrics that we covered on the last episode, which is that we're still seeing that schedule flexibility remains the number one reason why people are leaving other than pay from their frontline jobs. This is really important because in order to retain your talent, you have to also you have to understand what is important to them, but you also have to be able to attract talent using the things and understanding and providing what is important to them. So if we know that employees are saying that schedule flexibility and schedule transparency are of the most important things to them, then why wouldn't we provide them those things, right? So understanding that this 63% is representative of prospective employees, candidates saying that this is a huge incentive for them, I think it goes a long way, and it actually speaks volumes about some of the challenges that companies might be facing today with hiring talent. If a company is able to say, hey, I have, this solution thanks to Legion, and obviously, again, I know that this is a Legion sponsored podcast, but I'm speaking through this objectively. If one company has our solutions and is able to provide employees with this flexibility and transparency and ownership, and another company doesn't have that ability to provide employees that, then and we know that this is single-handedly one of the most important factors for someone, why would they go to an employer that doesn't offer them something that is really important to them? So when we think about breaking down the state of the hourly workforce, part of it is recognizing that, people and employees want what they want, and we have to meet their needs as employers. We have to figure out how we're going to not only compromise, but also provide the resources and the solutions that employees want. Continuing on with the metrics here, we are seeing trends with Gen Z. So Gen Z hourly employees want faster, easier access to their earned pay. And this is something that we've talked about for sure on previous episodes, but this idea of earned wage access, instant pay, if you will, this is a huge trend, and right now is a perk, is meaning that if in some organizations they offer this earned wage access, then that is a perk for the employee. But I would imagine that in the next decade or so, this is going to shift into an expectation, given that society has moved into a bit of an appreciation for more gig-like work. And so when we think about Gen Z wanting faster, easier access to pay, to break down, I want to provide some statistics here from the survey. More than half, so 57% of hourly employees who hold more than one job said that they do so because they don't make enough money to cover rent and food. Employees 18 to 24 are 5 times more likely to hold a primary job and a side gig job than older age groups. And 29.7% of employees in that age group of 18 to 24 would pick up more shifts if they could get paid immediately after that shift. That is like some major data. And actually, I feel two ways. One, I feel sad that people have to have 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. And I feel really excited about these metrics because there's an opportunity here to make people's lives easier and better, which is what we're trying to do. And so when we think about 57% of hourly employees having more than one job, so the majority of people have more than one job because they can't afford to live otherwise, and almost 30% of employees just within the ages of 18 to 24, so this is not even all employees, but just in that age group, are willing to work more if they can get paid immediately after the shift. So this is saying we have a challenge where people are not earning at a rate that sustains their lives, and they are also willing to work more at one job if it means they can get paid immediately. So this is literally probably the easiest problem and solution in one moment. We have the problem of people need to earn more, and we have the solution of they're willing to work more if we give them their earned wage access. If we give them access to receiving their pay immediately after the conclusion of their shift. That's insane. Most of the time you have a problem and you work to solve it. You're trying to figure out, how do I solve this problem? Here we're saying we have this problem and we know what the solution is. And on top of it, another problem is that a lot of the time shifts go uncovered in many frontline businesses because of a need for more talent. Maybe you're understaffed, right? An increase in demand, and not having enough coverage with the talent that you have to meet that demand. So now we know that employees in this age group, especially, a third of them are saying, I'd be willing to take on more shifts if you can pay me in the moment. And so I would say to those employers who are struggling potentially to fill their shifts because of the labor challenges, that if they look to solve this problem in a different way by offering earned wage access, like instant pay, that they will actually probably solve two problems at once. Not only are they going to engage their teams more because we know that this is important to them and it's impactful on their lives. They're working two jobs because they can't sustain themselves otherwise. So now you're removing their need to have to do that. So you're enabling a better work-life balance. You're enabling more well-being, or better well-being for your employees. But also, if you invest in earned wage access, now you're giving them an incentive to work more as well. You're giving them an incentive to give them more, to give you more of their time. So, we always hear this in retail, or at least in my retail background, I always heard this, that, if you work two jobs, the company that you were presently in on a Monday at 12 o'clock, if you were at that company, that's the only company that matters. If you are scheduled to work on a Tuesday at that company, but you want to work for the other one, it doesn't matter. You're scheduled at company A, right? In this case, if you can remove the need for someone to have to work at another organization, a second job, to make ends meet, by giving them access to more shifts, by giving them access to their pay immediately after they've worked that shift, then you're incentivizing them to work more, but also to stay with your company. And you're also enabling them to have a better life. So obviously this is not calling in the challenge of pay, and where some people may feel they, are in need of being paid a different wage. This is not what the survey is looking at. Rather, it's looking at motivations and engagement and what the state of the workforce is today based on this polling population. So I think I was excited to share these statistics, especially in this section, because I think that's a really, really interesting group of data to think about. How are we meeting the needs of our employees? Are we understanding the challenges that they are faced with? And are we actually solving and helping to solve some of those problems? And if we know that earned wage access is one way to solve potentially two problems, why wouldn't we invest in that solution? Why wouldn't we say, okay, this is a perk, this is an incentive, a benefit that we want to offer our people? I don't know. Don't let me get too passionate on this stuff, because I really can. I can be like a runaway train. I could probably write a novel on just that metric alone, and just that philosophy around earned wage access. I mean, that is huge. I'm sorry, it's huge. I'll move on, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that is huge. So, it's not an episode at the Frontline podcast if I don't talk about managers and their needs as well. So I have some manager data for you here too. 42% of managers surveyed said that managing callouts and no-shows take the most time and effort. And I think we talked about this on the last episode. This was actually an increase from last year's survey that we did, a 7% increase from last year's findings, which is significant, right? So we see that managers continue to struggle with managing these call outs and no call, no shows. And we realize too, when I say we, like anyone in the industry, in business and in organizations, or even in companies like Legion that are supporting these organizations, managers are constantly not burdened, but confronted with, the 911s and things that require their immediate attention, on top of the day-to-day expectations within their roles and things that they have to do, whether it's opening and closing a store, managing inventory, writing the schedule, right? All of those things are kind of expected parts of the job. But when these 911 moments happen outside of the internal parts of life, right? So like when we think about customer demand and changes in weather, things that actually impact externally, you have those 911 moments, but then you also have the internal 911 moments. Someone calls out, someone is sick, someone doesn't show up. You have a new hire and your trainer doesn't show up. You have a new hire and you don't have a trainer. How do you manage those situations? Well, what we're hearing here is that almost 50% of managers are saying that managing call-outs and no-shows alone takes the most time and effort. And that's just one fraction of a day in the life of a manager. So how do we make managers' lives easier and more efficient and more productive? Well, part of it is making sure that they're not spending their time, and I might go so far as to say wasting their time, on managing things that really come from so many other problems within, the challenges that we're facing from a labor perspective. So if companies can enable managers to not feel this way, to not feel that they are spending all of their time on managing call outs and no call, no shows, then that means that they're going to be able to invest their time in other places, in places of the business that make them feel proud to do what they do, that return the favor of feeling happy or, contributing to their happiness at work. Additionally, 57.5% of managers believe that matching employee preferences and availability with the needs of the business is most difficult within Gen Z. So this leads me to believe, especially thinking about the last set of metrics that I shared with you, this leads me to believe that there is even more of a gig-like sentiment among Gen Z than we probably realize, because their needs and their preferences and the business needs are probably not even speaking the same language right now. So how do we, as people in the industry, how do we communicate differently and again meet the needs of our employees? Well, we have to first understand what they want. What do our employees want? And if Gen Z is making up a significant percentage of the workforce, well, we're going to have to be able to flex and meet their needs. So if we understand that Gen Z, again, wants this flexibility to earn wages when they want, have this gig-like mentality, then we have to enable that behavior. We have to be able to provide those resources for Gen Z to feel accommodated at work. And it's interesting because I think in so many ways, businesses are still, trying to problem solve. Like, well, why do we have such high attrition? Why is it difficult to find talent? Well, sometimes you have to look at if you are solving a problem with a different set of solutions or if you're solving it with the same set of solutions. If you have the same problem or a recurring problem and you are actively trying to solve it with the same solutions that you've been using, then potentially that doesn't work. And we need to take a different approach. And that is where I kind of get this excitement around earned wage access, because that is a different approach that could end up resulting in a solved problem that has been recurring for a long time. 84% of managers agree that efficiency and productivity would improve if they could communicate with employees through the same app that they use to view their schedules. That is a mic drop moment. That is a huge majority. 84% of managers saying that if they could communicate with their employees in the same place where employees see their schedules, that this would greatly improve efficiency and productivity. So what does that mean? That means that managers need the opportunity and need to be able to communicate with their employees in the same place where those employees view their schedules. They want a one-stop shop. They want to be able to have everything in one place. And, a lot of companies, many companies, all the ones that I've been able to work at, have had huge tech stacks, huge, applications, and a huge number of applications that they offer employees. And seldom do we find a one-stop shop. Sometimes there are intranets and there are different places where people can kind of just convene to then be pointed in a different direction. But where do managers communicate with their employees? They're not communicating on an intranet. They're not communicating necessarily on a bulletin board, right? Like they're posting things, but is that necessarily effective communication, or is it just sharing information? And so I think this is a really interesting statistic, because communication is one of those things that will always be a challenge between a manager and employee. There will always be feedback that there needs to be more communication, more transparent communication, access to communication. There will, especially at the front line, because when you have hourly employees, how are they receiving communication? It's probably a little disjointed. They probably get it from multiple avenues, including hearing it through the grapevine, and that's just not effective, and it's certainly not efficient, and it can really make a situation like onboarding or sharing information that's new to an employee really challenging. This is where communication is really key, and I think that sometimes it's overlooked because it's like, you're just kind of rolling with the punches, and every day is fast, and you're just moving and moving and moving. But the needs remain the same, that managers and employees need to feel connected. And that feeling of connection is it's hugely influential with DE&I. The more connected, the more transparent an employee feels that their manager, their employer is, the more clear an employee is on what is happening in an organization, the more inclusive they feel their organization is. It's kind of intuitive, right? Like we feel included when we are communicated to. To me, it's super intuitive that communication and inclusivity go hand in hand. So actually, companies are in a really prime spot here to use and leverage communication as one of their focuses in elevating DE&I. So with communication and inclusivity being so closely connected, this is another way that businesses can solve problems in a different way. If you're, as everyone should be, focused on DE&I and, really focused on maybe, understanding what challenges are in the organization, or how you can promote a DE&I at your organization, top down, bottom up, in every direction, right? Maybe starting with communication, how you communicate, what you communicate, when, and ensuring that it's transparent, especially when we think about frontline employees, needing to feel connected and included. That could be a great way to continue to solution and elevate DE&I measures. So again, there are recurring challenges and recurring problems within organizations, and solutions need to be different than what they were, because if the problem is still not solved, then the solution didn't work. Something in what was applied wasn't working. And so it's a matter of changing the way that we solve those problems. So I'm going to leave you with this idea of future-proofing organizations. I know from a few episodes back, actually, maybe it was my conversation with Leanne Levensaler on the first episode, but I think we talked about future-proofing and if that is possible. And, I think when we think about future-proofing, it's not necessarily saying that a business is going to be immune to the challenges of the future. Rather, it's saying we are implementing solutions that will enable us to scale in a way that's sustainable, that's supportive, that's inclusive, and in a way that allows us to tomorrow's problems more easily. That's what future-proofing means to me. And, the survey kind of closes out saying that businesses have to find creative ways to future-proof their businesses by proactively improving the work experience for hourly workers and managers. So what is that saying? It's not saying that tomorrow there won't be problems or challenges, or in 5 years from now, for hourly workers and managers. This is saying that businesses are obligated and encouraged to find new, creative, different ways to ensure that their business in the future is solving some of these problems today so that they don't exist tomorrow, or that they're different tomorrow, and that if there is a problem tomorrow, that these solutions are actively working to minimize those problems and to enable the solutioning of tomorrow's problems. So that, again, that's future-proofing to me. That's how I read this conclusion. So I hope that in hearing all of this data and digging into some of these metrics, that you feel encouraged to go back to your organizations, back to your teams, to solve things differently, to solve today's challenges with a different lens, with a different set of solutions, so that we can actively and accurately solve today's problems. So with that, I would love to remind you to please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Again, we will be releasing episodes on a monthly occurrence, so I will see you next month. Until then, check out the show notes, connect with us, and head to the show notes just in general for more information. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in, and we will see you next month.